I actually spoke with a friend of yours, Hunter Martinez, and I actually had spoken with him a while back here with him about the group Decent Criminal, and then he had also had talked about the group that you guys are in together in Human Issue, and he had mentioned your name during the conversation as someone that I should look into as far as their music is concerned. So considering that I am a big fan of what he has done with the music and who he's into, and me getting into the catalog of music he's into, I decided to give it a shot. So I looked into your music that I've come across, especially with the album you've done that was released last year, Mater Dolorosa. So,
yeah.
And I hope you understand where I'm coming with this, because when I'm saying this here, please understand this is not me being negative at all, but because it's not the case here. But when I first had come across the music, I was not expecting the style of music that you were going for with the record. I actually was expecting more or less like a punk rock record, because that's kind of what I thought it was going to be more like. And then when I had listened to it, I definitely had stuck around to listen, but it wasn't until I came across the track Willow where I really started to understand the approach with your music. And then I had listened to the track, I'm already forgetting the name here, Circular Valley. And then listening to the record, and then going back to listening it again, going over YouTube to find some sort of visuals that I could come across here to get a feel for what it was you were trying to go for here. Then I started to have a better understanding of your approach with the music, and I've came to learn to appreciate as a result of that. So I have listened to the record on more than one occasion, and it was something that I was not really anticipating for me to come across here. Like I said, I was expecting a certain style of music, considering when Hunter was talking about listening to the Dahmers and a bunch of other hardcore punk bands out there. That's what I thought was going to be more along those lines. So this was actually a very genuine surprise. I've listened to the record enough times now that I've come to actually really love with what you have done, especially when it comes to the visual aspect of your songs, which I know that with your background. So when I have come across the videos that you've done, I was very intrigued with what the approach you're taking here, because it definitely had a lot of a creepy factor to it, and I mean that in a good way too. But it also had a lot of like, what's the word I want to use? Like this obscurity that I again was just really not expecting. So when I saw the visuals and then listening to the music, it was like, oh, okay, I see where the approach you're going for here. And I can actually see why Hunter was talking so highly of you in the conversation, because again, you were brought up, and he was saying that something I should look out for your music and pay attention to. And I'm glad I actually listened when he had recommended that, because then from there on, I actually started coming across some videos of your live performances as well too, which I have to say I was not expecting either. So each and every time I look into new aspects of as far as your visuals are concerned, with the videos and then your live performances, nothing what I was expecting at all. And to my genuine surprise, I was actually really entertained, and also I appreciated with what you were doing here. So this is me giving your flowers about how I was expecting one thing, did not get it, and was actually rather genuinely surprised with what I came across here, because it actually went against everything that I had been accustomed to in listening to in the last couple of years. And then to hear something really out there in terms of like just nothing normal, I actually like that about what you have done here. So I hope you don't mind me saying that and bringing that to your attention, because once I came across that and had listened to it more than one times here, you've actually got a fan out of me as a result of me listening to your different variations of your art that I've come across, that I actually become a very big fan of throughout the last, I would say, 2 months here since I've learned about you. So what I wanted just to highlight with you is, you had talked about in the past where you were growing up as a lover of art, and obviously your siblings had a lot of influence about your music and what they have obviously have shown at your home as far as what they have listened to, punk music, classic rock, things of that nature. And I actually picked up on that in the record too, especially with Circular Valley, which for me reminded me so much of the Doors. I'm not sure if that was intentional with that approach. So is that the case here?
No, but I see what you mean by that, and I like it, so that's cool.
Okay. Well, so I started picking up on what you were going, what I was picking up on was what were some of the influences that you had from the previous I guess, inspirations you've got from your family that you have then infiltrated with your music. But again, a lot of things you were doing there was really not the norm as far as like, I kind of liken to like when I think it was Stephen Carpenter of the Deftones, where he said that I love these metal bands, but I don't want to sound like them. And to me, that was kind of like the same impression that I got from you, where you grew up listening to a certain style of music, but that's not the music you want to play, is what I'm kind of gathering here. So is that kind of kind of a fair assessment about how you wanted to approach with your music when it comes to the style of music you're playing?
For my solo stuff, it's kind of like that. Like I play in a bunch of punk bands too, you know. Like I'm in Human Issue, I'm in Egrets, and Prissy Whip, which is kind of more of like a noise rock, hardcore, avant-garde thing. Like all of it has an experimental edge to it, you know what I mean? And the solo album, I was writing it more in a sense of therapy than I was writing it in the sense of like, I'm going to become a now solo musician, you know, when I wrote it, which was like 5 some odd years ago. So, and then COVID happened and my producer was like, let's put it out. So then I put it out and I started to do, you know, it got signed to a label and I started to do interviews, blah, blah, blah. But my like influence approach to it, or people kind of more along the lines of like Laurie Anderson. I don't know if you know who that is.
Sounds familiar.
She is like sort of the same in the sense of like, she was around all of the punk kids like in on the East Coast, like CBGB days. She was, if not married to, together with Lou Reed for a long time.
Oh, and I know who she is now. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
She was most known for like Oh Superman.
Yeah.
She was like an artist more so in general than she was like known as this sort of like specific musician. It's just like her art, she would go around to like galleries and stuff like that, and she wanted to do art that included like vocalization, like the art that included sound. And then she got like picked up via music and like became a musician, but it was sort of like all encompassing, right? So I was kind of going for more in that approach. And also like with the things like, I don't really, you know, I'm in the studio with my friend, we're writing these songs. I don't really play drums. So these like loopholes that I would choose to go about that, like making the percussion instruments for that album. Like a lot of the like we played toms and some of the more basic instruments, percussion instruments on the album, but a lot of it too was stuff that we made. Like a lot of it was like bed railing, or like using tin cans and putting them up close to the microphone, or we used like a foil with a pencil to hit it for a snare and shit like that. Like it was like experimental in that sense. Or I would like the vocal loops, like in Terminal Secrets, like vocal loops as a rhythm, different things to use as a rhythm.
I actually like that video too. That was actually a really good one as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I learned stop motion animation.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah, but also like, you know, we're in the pandemic, and I was out of work for a year, so I had a lot of time on my hands to like, you know, anyone in their right mind, like when the label was gonna release it, they were like, let's do a music video. They would make one music video. And they gave me like a little amount of money, you know what I mean? And I was just like, I'm gonna make 5 music videos.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, yeah. Because you did a cover for James Brown's song, It's a Man's World, and then of course Circular Valley, what was the other one? Terminal Secrets, and what was the other one too? There's 2 other ones as well that I think that was it Willow, I think was one of the videos too.
The Pharmacy,
that's right. Okay.
And I don't know, I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought there was 5 too, but yeah, I saw all of them. But yeah, here's the thing too about each of those videos. They're all very distinct as far as you know, the look of them and the feel for them, of course. The one that was actually the one that was actually the most surprised is with the Pharmacy. And that was the one where you had that like that dead eye look to with the makeup and
Yeah.
whatnot and coming out of the water. So I was curious to ask you about, I know that each project, each video you're doing is obviously a collaborative process here, but when you had intentions of making those videos, did you already have it in your mind about how you wanted to go about with each of those songs, or was it all just kind of like on the spot, or was already a preconceived or pre-production about what attempts you guys may want to go with as far as the overall look of the video is concerned, or the atmosphere or the feel of it, as you will?
Yeah, we did a lot of like pre-production type of stuff, and
Okay.
ideas coming up with an idea, or I came up with the idea and then I asked someone that I thought could execute that idea well. Like I work in film, so I have a lot
Right.
of filmmaker friends, and they were also out of work, so we had time on our hands. But like Terminal Secrets, I would use. I'm so, like kind of on the nose in a way. Like Terminal Secrets, it's kind of like a song about hiding who you really are. So me and my stop motion friend were like, oh, what if we did a bunch of things that were like a play on like changing your face or faces
Right.
changing.
Kind
So
of
then we
reminded me of
did that.
Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel. That's the first
Oh yeah,
person I got. Yeah.
I've gotten that before. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
That one's stop motion too.
Yeah.
And it was an influence for sure.
Okay.
And then for the pharmacy, I wanted to sort of like be less on the nose with the words for that song. And I wanted to, because, I really love horror. I'm a makeup effects artist and I love horror.
Right.
And I wanted to sort of alter it into like a witchy voodoo type of person, like using herbs or something like that's like pharmaceuticals and going into someone's blood. Like, what does that look like in a more horror type of way?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that it would be fun. So and then my like kind of direct inspiration was like the American Horror Story intros, where it's like flashing images of stuff
Yeah.
and you like are kind of trying to tie it all together.
Yeah.
But those intros are like what 30 seconds long, if
Right.
that, and the song is like 3 minutes long. So
Yeah.
it's like you have to make it kind of more interesting because it has to last the whole 3 minutes, which
Right.
is something that I recognized when I was making those videos. That I was like, fuck, why is all my songs like 3 to 4 minutes long? Like, why didn't I write shorter songs? Make shorter music videos for.
Was that the intention to write the songs for that length of time, or it just came organically and it turned out to be whatever the time length was?
Yeah, it just came organically.
Okay.
Plus, Paul, who I was writing the album with, do you know who Paul Rossler is? He played with the Screamers and 45 Grave and
He sounds really like a lot of these names are, because I grew up listening to Pump, but then there's a period of time where I stopped listening to them. So
yeah.
there some of the I'm slowly getting back into that, and some names are coming up that I've come across that I had forgotten for years, like you were talking about. So it was just that name sounds really familiar, but I'm sure if I pull up something from the previous work, I'll know exactly who they are. But it does sound familiar.
Yeah. So like as a songwriter these days, the way that he writes songs is sort of like how this album is too, in the sense of they're kind of on the longer side and they all have this like experimental edge to them too, and they all like kind of seem like he's done acid a lot in this past. You know what I mean? To a certain extent.
Okay.
But there's also like, with Willow, I wanted to simplify, because sometimes I like to step away. I feel like it could get kind of convoluted in this, like, oh, we want to fucking make instruments and we want to play this here, there, and guitar there, and what if we play this off key? And like a lot of the music that I make and bands that I'm in are kind of like that. And sometimes I just like to fucking step away and be like, let's do something simple for this one,
Well, I noticed that with the record, because I'm listening, because like I said before, when I first listened to the record, it's not what I expected it, and it's definitely it's definitely more of a as you mentioned before, like experimental. But when you start, well, at least when I started listening to it, I can get into it as the further and further I listen to it, but then you get to that halfway point, when you get to Willow, and then the trajectory kind of changes a little bit too, where it becomes a little bit more more like I guess you could say, I'm trying to find out what the right word is here, but it becomes pretty familiar as far as what I'm used to listening to. And then it goes
Yeah.
slowly goes right back into that experimental side of it as well too. But it still keeps that same momentum that Willow had started off with, where all the other tracks are kind of more or less still following those same familiar traits, but still doing the other aspect of what you had in the first couple of tracks, where it's just all over the place when it comes to the music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I also feel like those songs, because I'm getting together to like do an album release because the vinyl got here. It took a long time for the vinyl to get here. And so we're doing a record release at the end of January, and I'm getting a band together, and we're figuring out how am I going to perform these songs live, because a lot of it was like experiments in the studio, you know?
Right.
And it's cool how it's like growing now with like live drums and a drummer and like and uh and I almost like the songs more now. Like they, and even like, so the beginning of the album towards the end of the album, it's like in the same sense I was kind of growing as a musician at the same time, you know what I mean? Like by the time I got to Circular Valley, because this album I was theoretically writing over the past like, you know, 5+ years. So when I first started the album, I was a different musician when I finished the album, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I was growing as a songwriter even. So I even like those songs, some of those songs better than the ones that they, you know. And then now that we're doing it, figuring out live, and we're changing them a little bit too, I like them even more now. Like they're just like continuously growing, which is kind of cool. And I like want to incorporate things like a choir for the release show, and like I want to do the rhythm melody of Terminal Secrets, like the ha 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 part. Like I want to do that live with a choir, you know, like which I think would be really cool and like a big show.
I can see that. Yeah, I definitely could
And
see
doing
that.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting, the songs and my relationship to them, and like how they've grown and how they continue to grow. And like I think like the next album that comes out is going to be even better. Like I think that was a pretty good first album, and it's cool that the record label picked it up. But it almost to me sounds like a demo now. You know what I mean?
You really think that? Really?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't know if it's just because I've heard the things so many times, and like I know now what they sound like or the songs. But I feel like the next album will be even better, and I think that the live recordings that I've done are better, and I think that
So you've already started the recording for the new material?
yeah, like with the band, every time we get together to figure out how we're going to like play the songs and who's going to play what instrument to reflect what sound, we record it.
Interesting. Okay.
So I have the recordings of what it sounds like with live drums and what it sounds like with choirs. And so yeah, I have different versions to listen back to which I might even I released one of the songs. It's like the live version of Terminal Secrets on Bandcamp.
Okay.
So I
I
might
don't think
even
I've heard
just
that
like
one yet.
release those songs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so you know, now that you're it's obvious you're evolving with how you're wanting to approach with the songs, and especially with the live product, or with the live shows you're going to be doing soon. Are you still kind of following the same approach with with this past record, where you're keeping it more of like an experimental aspect of it, where you're just trying obscure things, or do you have a more of a are you trying to go back to more like a familiar territory as far as like keeping it more I'm trying to be very careful how I say this here, but more familiar as far as like songwriting and music composition is concerned?
Yeah, I think a combination of both. Like I think everything that I do will always sort of have an experimental edge on it, unless I'm not the one that's like well, even bands that I join in usually end up going that way, you know what I mean? Like even in Human Issue with Hunter, who wrote all those songs, and I just sort of sing on them. Like if we start writing songs together, which we are, I'll probably bring the crass to the like anarcho element of it. You know what I mean? Where like crass had more of like experimental type of stuff going on. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like,
right.
I think that just comes to me naturally, and that's like stuff that I like more. Like I feel like I get bored with the very like basic things. So I think I will always have that, but I also like want to include something that's more of like a PJ Harvey to it. You know what I mean? Something that like, has kind of more of like a rock and roll, pretty basic aspect to it or something, but also includes like something that's like Bjork or Fever Ray, where it has like maybe like an electronic pop, or it has its own experimental aspect to it, but it like is maybe easier to listen to or something.
Okay.
In terms of like the masses,
Right,
you know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah, you know, and here's the thing with your music though. I actually, like I said before, like I hope I hope you don't mind repeating this again, but when I was listening to it, like it took me a while to get into it, not because I didn't think it wasn't good. It's just that like like I said before, I'm used to a certain pattern of music, just the standard formula, if you will. But when I started to listen to your songs, you know, I started to become more appreciative of it, and then became you know, actually ended up like loving the music. But here's how I always compare it to someone, I think who it was, Cedric of the Mars Volta, where he described one of the records. I think it was probably it wasn't Francis to me. It was one of the other records. I can't, the last Carbentorian, whatever it was. I can't remember. But he basically said that he makes music to, you know, not to appeal to the masses, but to appeal to his art, to his artistry. And you know, where everyone tries to make the wheels round, he's keeping the wheels square for to have people who want to listen to it take the time to listen to it. And because there was obviously something that for me that I connected with the music, for me to stick around with it, to want to listen to, because there was something that I did start to understand with what you were going for. But again, it's just my everyday routine of what I like to listen to. There's always a formula that I'm always surrounded with, that I'm used to. So to step out of that was actually, like I said before, a genuine surprise. As of late, you know, you and Hunter have been doing live shows with Human Issue, and you know that has been kind of coming up now, especially with the last month or so, where you guys had released the song Reflection. But I don't think there hasn't been anything announcement, as far as I can tell, for any sort of new news about the music or the record is concerned, outside of what was released with Reflection, and anything else outside of live shows are concerned. So do you guys have any sort of new status of what you expect with the band, as far as the record's concerned at this point in time right now, other than with your live shows?
Yeah, the label that released the track, like the single,
right,
digitally, they're putting out our 7-inch, and we made like a tape for the little tour that we went on. So there's 6 songs on there.
Okay, so it's an EP you guys are expecting to releasing soon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So we'll release that, and then we'll just continue playing and writing more.
Well, so how's the show going for you guys so far? Because I've been keeping up with what you guys have been doing on social media. But apart from the live shows, are you guys looking to potentially release some new songs that's not going to be released on the record just yet onto the show? Because I'm not sure if you guys are doing a limited show run as far as what you guys are doing with their music.
Well, yeah, the live set right now is only like 12 minutes long, because we have those 6 songs and then we do a cover. So we'll probably, write more and then do it live before it gets released. But those 6 songs are going to be released on a 7-inch. And then, like I said, we have the tapes. And then, I don't know, it's just kind of in a see where the band goes type of place. Hunter's a really driven person, and this is his sort of
his baby.
Yeah. So, he wanted to be a singer and to let out some, I don't know, angst, I guess.
Yeah.
And so he did. And then he just wanted me to do it with him. But on the tracks, it's called a music collective because it was just going to be about the recordings anyway. So like he got a bunch of different people involved in the recordings, like Rick Agnew and the Brian from Global Threat and shit like that. So, and they were all in the recordings, but they're not. When we decided to tour with it, we just like got a band together that was able to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and his brother Trishan is also on some of the because I did see pictures of his brother performing live in one of the shows that I can recall you guys did recently. So is he part of just the band's a tour live shows just whenever he's available, or are you guys already have it in mind with who is going to be playing at what shows once the next event comes out?
Well, he played on the last show because the guitar player that we were playing with on the little tour and stuff couldn't make it. So, I mean, I'm sure, for instance, at that show, that was the last show that we played. It was at Chain Reaction with Death Club. And Hunter had all these ideas because Decent Criminal's about to go on tour. And he was like, if we're on tour here, maybe you guys could fly and like meet me in New York or Europe. And then we could do a little tour in between these tours because I'll have this day off. And like, if we did something like that, Tristan would probably be playing guitar, you know?
Right.
But all that sounds crazy, and I doubt that will happen.
But there's no like definitive like members of the group right now because it sounds like to me so far. Even when I was talking to Hunter at the time, it was almost as if though with whoever is able to play would be essentially be the band at least at that for that night. But it was nothing really definitive as of yet as far as who is going to be the touring band, if you will, when it comes to the live sets here. So that's kind of still up in the air as to how that's being put together here so far.
Yeah, I think we like everyone that we found that we did this little tour with, but I think it is still going to be a music collective. So if those people couldn't do it for some reason, then he would probably just find others to do it, you know?
When you guys are now that you guys are playing live for the last couple of shows you guys have done, like how are you feeling with as far as like the playing what you've done on in the recording studio and then going in and play it live? Like are you really pretty confident about with what you guys have done so far together with the band and seeing what the reaction is? Because I mean, from what I gather from what I've seen online, it looks like it's perceived pretty positive, but from your perspective, like what's it like for you and seeing that reaction?
I think it's been received really well. I didn't know what quite to expect, and I've only performed in one band that was sort of like dual vocal thing where we're all like just vocalists and singing at the same time. So I wasn't sure how that was going to translate live like it did on the record, you know, between Hunter and I.
Right.
To just, that's all you do. You're a vocalist and you're dual vocaling with someone. So you're like giving someone the part and then you're just standing there like, yeah. And then like, I don't know, you know? So it was interesting, but I think I do like bands like that. And I think it gives it a cool energy. I think the main reaction that people have had is like, your set is so short. I wish it was longer.
Oh, okay.
It's like, yeah, because it's like, you know, I think he wanted the songs to be like short and hard. So, but there's only 6 of them with a cover. So, you know, it just makes it a short set, but it's kind of like at the same time, like a leave them wanting more type of thing, I guess. Right. But I feel like he expressed to me that he wasn't sure which direction he wants to take it in from here. So I have my own ideas, and I think other people in the band do too. And, you know, when you start collaborating as a band, as opposed to like him writing the songs and then having other people come in and like do their parts on it and making their own 2 cents on some of them, like it kind of opens the door for it to head in its own directions. Like, I think we very easily fell into like a really hardcore punk type of place. And that's like the type of bands that we've been playing with, but not necessarily where we might stay. Although I'm down for that. Like, I don't really have a hardcore band going on right now. And I like that type of music. And and I like to bring a sort of anarcho element to it. And so it would be cool for me personally to have a band like that in the mix of everything else I have going on.
So because given that this is like Hunter's like baby, if you will, when he reached out to you to have you contribute to the band here, was it kind of like an open collaborative process here, or was he like, hey, I like what you've done with your other music here, so I want you to bring some of that into this, but I want you to do it like that? Or again, is he just like, hey, let me know what you think about trying it like this, and then if you have some ideas, go ahead and try and see how that works? Like, what was that process for you guys in the beginning before you guys got to the recording, or during the recording sessions?
It was like a mixture of both. Like, he came to my house with a guitar and a notepad of some words that he wrote before we went to the studio, and he was like, what do you think about this? And what do you think about these words? Do you think they're dumb? And and so, and I gave him, my opinions on it. And when we were in the studio, he likes the style of singing that I have, and he likes the bands that I'm in and like where I come from and stuff. So I think he looks forward to that being an addition and me doing things in my own way. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm just like a really busy person. So a lot of the times when I collaborate with people, sometimes they give me an option where it's like, do you want to write the words or do you want me to write the words? And if I'm super busy and like, write the words, I'll sing them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's just like, I don't know. I'm in so many projects and I've done so many collaborations, and on top of that, trying to like, be a prisoner of the film industry to keep a roof over my head. So sometimes it's like easier to just jump in and insert like my Heatherisms into different projects, my style of singing and different things, but, and like I said, when you start jamming in a band, things like sort of change because everyone's adding their 2 cents. So I'm actually excited to see where that goes, if Hunter allows it.
So you mentioned about your schedule then, because for anyone who doesn't know, you actually work in the film industry at doing special effect mix-up and things like that. How especially now that things are starting to clear up as far as COVID is concerned, are you having more time to be able to go into with your music, having to just see what's your schedule like, and then let everyone else who is waiting for your response as far as your availability is concerned? Like, how's that working out for you now with that department is concerned? Like, are you getting the time? Are you getting more freedom to be able to make time for the music, or it's just whenever it's available, whenever you're available to do that?
At this point, I have to make myself make the time. Like, I have to turn down jobs to make the time because it's so busy in the film industry right now that I'll work every day, and then I'll like maybe have weekends off, but I'll work every day if most likely if I say yes to everything. So and it's not like, I go to work for 3 hours and come home and things to do. I'm at work for 12 hours at least, it's like 12 hours plus most of the time. So, and then you come home, come to bed, wake up and have to do it all over again. It's like, it doesn't, the film industry, at least the part that I'm in, it doesn't allow for much of anything else, which is why a lot of people in the industry, like, either don't have kids, or if they do, they like barely see them, or, like the film industry is kind of an all-encompassing industry, and I kind of knew that going into it. So at this point, I have to make the space. And, with COVID happened and I had a lot of time then, of course, but because I was out of work for a year when the industry was super busy, I was really excited and needed the money. So I like really jumped into filmmaking and makeup effects work and kept that going. So then everything on music was sort of on pause. And I think it hit a point where, you know, shows started to open up and to happen again. And my label is like, hey, your vinyl's here and your solo music needs a release show. And like, what about us? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
We got to push that music out there, remember? And I'm like, yeah.
Was it difficult for you to manage the schedule to make the time to get the, you know, the music side of your career going? Or you know, like when you're reaching out with the labels reaching out to you and say, hey, we, you know, you should be doing this here to kind of get the ball rolling, were you already telling them in advance, but hey, I'm going to be really busy for the next X of days here, which, so let me get back to you once it clears up? Or, okay, well, I'm going to call you tomorrow to let you know when I'm able to get things rolling here for the record? Like, how was that for you in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I do that, and then I I tell them, I always let them know what's going on, and they like to know, you know, even with playing with Human Issue, like they like to know I'm doing a little tour, because anything that's affiliated with music in general, even if that music isn't on their label, it's promoting myself as a musician, as an artist. So it's like gaining a following, even for me, you know what I mean?
Right.
Which is beneficial to them in the long run. And they know and they understand that. And they're like friends of mine. So it's not like just a business entity that is up my ass or anything. Like, so like I was in Mexico, the jungle of Mexico, for a month, and I had to do these voice over things for radio stations, like, hi, this is CrowJane and you're listening to KPC of Washington, blah blah blah, you know. And so there I had an emailed list of all these radio stations I had to do introductions for.
I see.
And I told them, I'm in the jungle of Mexico. I'm with barely any internet. My phone doesn't work, you know.
Right.
I'll try to get to these when I can. Might be a minute, you know.
I see. Okay.
But I did end up doing it, and when I got into Wi-Fi and had a day off and shit like that. So it's a hard thing to balance. It can be, sure.
But is it overwhelming for you at times to do that, having to balance that? Okay.
Yeah. It is. Like right now I have Human Issue just did its thing. So I'm done with Human Issue for right now. It's like out of my brain for a minute. Boom, bye. Because right now I have to focus on, with work, I have to focus on playing with my friend's band Bustier. We're playing this festival at the end of November. It's called Substance LA.
Okay.
With like Chelsea Wolfe and Geneva Jacuzzi and stuff like that. And it's a really cool festival. So it's like now I have to learn those songs, and so that I could play that festival, their show. Meanwhile, Prissy Whip plays with the Locusts in December, and we're doing a little mini tour, and we want to write a whole new set. So like that's where I'm going tonight, is to write those songs. So it's like I have Prissy Whip and Bustier in my brain, and the CrowJane project, because I have 2.5 months until that release show happens, and then working too. So it's like I just have to, whatever is the next indicated thing, I have to just like focus on that, and then everything else goes away, and then move on to the next. Otherwise, yeah, it's like really overwhelming.
so how do you learn to manage that for yourself? Because you know, because you work with your full-time gig, you're working 12 hours a day in some cases now, where you know, you mentioned before, you have to make time for that. But when you first, because, you know, COVID last year happened, you're now working for a year and then getting back into that. How did you learn to be able to manage that for yourself, to, you know, having to deal with the schedule and then making the time for your other endeavors too? Was that kind of like an overwhelming process, and having to learn and having to get yourself readjusted to that? Or were you prepared, like, okay, so now that I know that I'm going to go back into work, the next set of events with the music stuff is concerned, okay, I know I'm going to have to reach out to everybody and let them know this is what's going to be happening. So so how was that for you in the beginning to get that adjusted for yourself?
I feel like I'm still getting adjusted, honestly. I feel like COVID and the pandemic made me more of a person that doesn't, I think before the pandemic happened, I was really good at doing a million things all at once. And I would always run from one thing to the next. Like, in fact, people would be like, how do you ever sit down and watch TV? You know what I mean?
Okay.
In one of my interviews, I actually got asked that. I'm like, yeah, I do. But so I think the sort of ease and less of a crazy schedule that I experienced during the pandemic, and I kind of grew to like that and appreciate it, that I still feel like I'm adjusting to like the madness of doing all of the things that I do right now. But I think that, you know, like I said, it's just sometimes you have to say no. Like, maybe I won't get paid for those certain amount of days so that I could do music, because music fulfills me in a different way. You know what I mean? Like, obviously I'm not doing the type of music that's like earning me thousands, you know, like, so it's a passion project, but it's a passion project that I do get paid for somewhat, but it's like something that I do because I have to sort of like emotionally as a human being, so to speak, as opposed to, you know, in a material type of way. So, and I think that when the pandemic, like after, when work started to come back and I was getting a lot of really cool jobs and being paid really well, I think my mind sort of went to like, pause all music, focus on this, and like change your life and alter it for the better, because that's what you like need money to do that.
Right.
This world. So I focused on that for a while. And then when I got to a comfortable place with all of that, I was like, okay, now I'm super lacking with like, I don't know, artistic expression and the way that music gives me. So I'm going to bring back the music and do all the things that I need to do. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at with all that now. But
so, you know, when you're with your full-time gig with the special effects makeup, is that, I mean, this is obviously, I know you mentioned in the past that you were passionate about as well. So the fact that you're able to do that on a full-time basis, does that, you know, I'm curious about with you, because you're doing this on a full-time basis on a 12-hour shift for the most part, and having to do it again, and then leaving very little room in other areas as far as your interests are concerned. Did that ever change your, I guess, your connection to that form of art, that may have kind of tainted it a bit because of the long hours and the amount of time and dedication that's required for that it almost seemed like maybe you wanted to take a step back and just focus on other things, a lot like with what you mentioned now, where you're focusing on the music that gives you that artistic freedom in other areas that maybe your full-time gig didn't necessarily want to give you, that you may have anticipated?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, I love what I do.
Okay.
Sorry, my cat's like playing with the thing. It's funny. I love what I do with like the makeup and makeup effects, and like I was a painter before I did that. So it's like, and it's really cool that I can make a living off of a creative job like that, and I'm super appreciative of it. But you know, there is a gray cloud to be of the film industry, and it's not like I'm spending the entire time painting, you know, like I spend the first, you know, most of the time I spend maybe the first 4 hours of my day, if that, doing the creative aspect of the job, and then the rest of the time I'm sort of just on set touching it up, you know.
Right.
But I mean, the hours are grueling, you know. That's why the strike was, I don't know if you heard about it, is
the IAFTA strike. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm referring with that.
I'm in the union, so I'm under IATSE. So like, yeah, I was, you know, my union's a part of the strike, and that's why it's being talked about, because it's just like so grueling. But I really like what I do there too, and it gives me something else, but it just doesn't. Music is so special for like performing live and writing music and collaborating with other musicians. Like it's its own special thing, and I haven't found what I received from that anywhere else, you know. So
yeah,
it's something that I want to do until I don't know, physically can't anymore.
Well, if you don't mind in commenting about that, because for anyone that doesn't know about I asked you what that particular union being, it was on almost at a point where the strike would eventually shut down the industry, if you will, because one of the biggest things was that the amount of work that you guys have put into the industry, as far as working these long hours and then having very little time for not just for your own personal life, but in other areas too, that eventually had hindered the ability for you to be able to dedicate the time to that, because all the work that you guys are putting into with what you're doing was just way too consuming, to the point where you guys needed to have someone to consider that there has to be a certain amount of time you guys are able to put into work, so that way you guys have the ability to put in time in other areas, especially when it comes to your personal life, family, friends, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. So could you, are you would you, are you able to commentate about how, now that things have kind of turned in a more positive light, from what it looks like, where you guys are not going to be given a certain structure that you guys are going to work a certain amount of times, then stop, recharge, and then go back to working again in a much more efficient way that's going to be helpful for you guys, rather than being a setback to have an effect on your own personal life, if you will?
Well, it's in negotiations. So like basically the head ponchos that are the ones that make the contracts for like CBS, NBC, you know, everything that's underneath the umbrella of like all the stations that we are shooting productions for.
Right.
They are making these contracts. So, and the contracts have been changing, you know, since they've existed, and particularly in the past like 20 years, for all sorts of different reasons. Like California especially started to have, like, the filming started to leave LA and California for like Georgia and Canada, because the tax incentives, and it was really expensive to shoot here and all of that. So basically, in order to keep film here and all the people that work here in the film industry employed, the contracts have been changing to make it better or easier to shoot here, which have made lower wages, which have, you know, longer hours. And with like new media, like when Netflix started to come out and Amazon and all these things that are outside of the theaters or regular TV stations, those were new contracts written in a way that were like, well, we aren't really sure how this is going to pan out. So it's under like an experimental contract, which it was cheaper to film under those contracts. So now years have gone by. People with Amazon and Netflix are billionaires. And it's like, these are no longer new experimental contracts, you know,
okay.
Like it's now known how these productions are going to work, and they should be paying more money for it. So like they wrote a new contract that was supposed to pass. That was something that we were like, absolutely not. Like the members of IASU, it affected our hours for health insurance, meaning it would be harder to achieve that, which is already hard. It affected our pensions, which it's like not a great pension deal anyway. It's like something that's just like, you will be not in total poverty when you're old, sort of contract. You know what I mean?
Okay. So someone's like, here's a nice gift card, go home and, you know, and celebrate, you know, and thank you for your service. It's kind of more or less along those lines and how it was looked at.
I mean, it's slightly better than that, but
okay.
And then they wanted to take lunch away. They wanted us to work longer, blah, blah. So it's like, you work a certain amount of hours, and these days you're in a mask and you don't stop because they want to take lunch away. So they gave us this contract, and people in IATSE were like, fuck that, this is a trash deal. These people have billions of dollars off of our backs. We're exploited workers.
Mm-hmm.
Let's fight this. And it was kind of a good time because Governor Newsom changed the sort of tax incentives in California, and now it's easier to shoot here again. And also coming out of COVID, they were just, you know, they didn't shoot production for a whole year. They don't want to go back. If we strike, they can't shoot it again, and it's bad for them, good for us. So we like took the point in time to have of negotiations to vote on if we wanted to strike, and everyone said yes, we'll strike because the contract's a crap deal. But then this strike was sort of just like a threat for them to sign our counter agreement of the contract that we want.
Right.
So now it's like going back and forth, and it's in negotiations, and then it will still have to lead into a vote. Since some people want to ask for more, other people want to accept what they offered us in this past negotiation. So now we're kind of split in the film industry. And then the shooting happened on the Alec Baldwin film, which was see? You know what I mean? Like
well, that the agreement, wasn't there an agreement prior to the events of the shooting on the film Rust that you were mentioning about here, that wasn't there an agreement already that the producers and everyone else involved with ISK are meeting in the middle, where they have come to an agreement that, okay, now this is where we're moving forward with here, and everyone else in this particular union are now in agreement that this is where we all want. Is that where they're is that right now, or because you mentioned before you're still in negotiations, so does that mean that it hasn't been finalized as of yet?
It's not finalized. No.
Okay, but it's still moving towards where everyone is in agreement about where you all want to be at as far as the where negotiations are going with here. Is that fair to say?
Right. Like we said, this is our counter agreement, and they came back with us with a contract that said like, okay, we'll give you this and that, and then, but you have to meet us in the middle on these certain things and blah, 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 on these terms. So, so basically we all still have to vote on it and like see what happens with it. But like I said, we're split because some people want to ask for more and they're not happy with what they gave us. And some people are like, well, they gave us basically what we asked for, so we should just stop, So it's split. I don't really know what's going to happen, to be honest.
But for yourself, though, hearing what you have heard as far as where those negotiations were going and where the agreement was heading to, were you content with it, or were you still kind of mixed about it, or were you just in flat out disagreement with it, with where they're heading with that?
I'm mixed about it because I think that with Netflix and content and everything being pushed out so fast and in this competition with each other, I think it doesn't have to be that way. I think that it's that way because it makes people billions. And I think that there's a world that we could work for 10 hours a day maximum, 5 days a week, and always have weekends off, and the content that they want could still be created. You know what I mean? Like it would just, you would have to shoot for longer. And that's like why people, like some of the greats, got out of the industry in the first place, was because everyone wanted to pump shit out so fast in order to create the TV show or the movie, that they were like, no, like think about films and like Star Wars, like the first Star Wars and stuff like that, like, or Jurassic Park. Those films would take years to make and a lot of money. And then people just don't want to do that anymore. Like they want pre-production to be a couple of weeks, and then you jump into filming and they go and for 3 other more weeks or a few months or whatever, and then they pump it out and give it to people in post and have them work all night long, and then release it to the masses of people and then make their billions and then do it again. You know what I mean? Like, so there's just a way to do it without that, I think. So, which is the point I would like to get to.
Yeah, and
that's reality.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, that because here's the thing, because I've actually with the show here, I've reached out to a lot of people who, mostly work in independent movies, and and one of the things that I've heard consistently across the board is that especially with independent movies, where they may have had maybe 6 years ago a production of like maybe a month and a half, right, and they have a certain budget for that production. But then one of the biggest problems that occurs is that even though the film may be well received, a illegal downloading has also affected that as well too, which then had shortened the budget for, let's say, the sequel or the next set of productions that they were intending on working on, where the money is not as nowhere near as high as it was previously or as they anticipated. So then it kind of dropped down a bit, but they're still having to crank it out with a certain amount of time. That it's really affected a great deal of filmmakers and actors that are working on these projects, that they're wanting to deliver the best set of the best products out there, but there's really not enough time and money given to them because, you know, the industry has changed a lot. So that's one of the reasons why I had reached out to you too, because apart from the music, I also have come to learn about your background in the film industry. But it's like, I always like to hear the stories of where people are with their career when it comes to that particular field. Especially now that with the strike that was looming there, and then obviously now the things that are going on with the Rust film, with the tragic shooting, there's like a trajectory that's going to change. It's going to have some major impacts, whether it be in a positive or negative light, but it's going to change everything. And my biggest concern with the industry is that, are they going to make these changes for the better because it's going to benefit the well-being of those involved, or is it just more of a business move just to kind of give people a I don't know what's the best way to describe it, but to just say, listen, guys, we're going to do this here, so be quiet and move on, and everything's going to be fine. Like, that's kind of my concern as well, because Brandon Lee is just one thing where people brought that attention to everybody of what needs to be taken care of as far as gun safety is concerned. And now here we are almost 30 years later, we're right back at it again when this would have been handled the very first time around after that incident. So I mean, I kind of rambled on about that, but it's just that it's always a concern of mine that the people that are behind the scenes that are really running things, are they really taking that into consideration of the real set of values that are need to be put in place in the first place to look out for the best interests of the people that are behind the scenes that are making the project as well too, that tend to be overlooked.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I would hope that that, you know, the people that sort of have the power are decent enough human beings that they want to care for their workers. But you know, there's an ugly side to it where, you know, sometimes people don't care. So I would hope that it changes for the better, but from what I've seen most of the time, it's we'll treat you however we want to treat you, and if you're lucky enough to be union, you'll at least be getting paid for it. So shut up because you're getting paid. You know what I mean? And sometimes I'm like, cool, I want to be paid that money, you know? I want to work from fucking 6 a.m. till 2 a.m. and be back at 6 a.m. and and I'll get all the penalty fees, and I'll be in beyond golden hour, and I'll make $10,000 in 4 days. Sure, that sounds great. It's just like when you have to do that time and time again, you're like, even when you're there in the process of it, you're tired and all you want to do is sleep, and you're delusional, and you're trying to like consume massive amount of energy drinks and like to create this thing that, you know, millions of people are going to see and it has to be amazing. It's like when you're in the moment, you're like, fuck this, you know, light it all on fire. I hate everyone here. Let's go home. We might die on the drive home. My life isn't worth it. You know what I mean? And then sometimes you get the paycheck afterwards and you're like, oh, maybe I'll do that again. But then you're in it again and you're like, nope, this is definitely not worth it. You know? People being paid for it has worked. And that has been brought up in conversations with the strike, is like, well, I don't always want to work on a job that's 10 hours, because if I never make overtime, then I'll never make that's like the good money, you know what I mean? But it's like, to me, it's more of a consistent thing. Like if wages are higher and you are making good money consistently because now there's more jobs every day, then like you don't have to work yourself gruelly for a week and make a bunch of money for that 1 week, you know what I mean? And then need like 2 weeks of recovery. Like, you just make good money more consistently. like most people do in the world.
Well, you actually brought up something before in the past from what I recall in one of your interviews where you had mentioned about that, you being a female in the industry, especially in the makeup industry, there is a different perception on how people tend to look at you. And I'm wondering now for you, considering that you've been in it for a bit of time now, I mean, has that changed for yourself along the way? Because what I've also been curious about with you is that because you're a female in the makeup industry, a special effects major, I meant to say, I'm wondering if that had tainted your perception about how you look at the industry, or maybe you had an idea for it prior to that and you were prepared for it, but now being through the grind and having seen that, and having talked with people who may not look at you the same way because you're not a man, or you're not the most respected individuals tend to be males in the industry when it comes to that field, and here you are, a woman in that field, trying to just do your work and hope that you get recognition for it. Maybe not necessarily for the fame, but just more for the respect aspect of it, where, hey, she's done a really good job, give her the job because she's more than capable of pulling it off. Do you feel like that has changed for you along the way from your experience in that, or do you still feel like it's still more or less the same thing and it's just taking too long for it to get to that point now?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely like no secret that the film industry, along with like a lot of other industries, are male dominated. And it's also like, I hear all kinds of stories of people that were, when the unions were first created, or, women makeup artists that have such like ugly tales of like back in the day of being a woman makeup artist, or like, I used to work in makeup effects shops, which is like more of like the pre-production, like the labs where you're making the prosthetic pieces or stuff like that.
Right.
And a lot of those shops have their own sort of politics, and a lot of those shops are also really male dominated, and everyone kind of knows it. And a lot of the times they put the females on like the sewing or like the hair punching parts or whatever it is, and then leave like the sculpting to the painting or the molding to the dudes. And I think a lot of the people that taught me were males and stuff like that. And I think that because it is such a known thing, that there's people out there that try to push it into a different direction. I think they recognize it, they understand it, therefore they hire more women, or women start sets that will only hire women. And it's the same thing that's going on with people of color. It's like they sets now will say, you can't hire only white people. You could hire some white people, and then you have to hire people of color on here. And it's the same thing with women. And especially if it's like a cast that's people of color, like, and you see it happening all the time now, where it's like all the movies that are coming out, and it's almost like, oh, okay, like, that like Hollywood is aware of this problem, and they're obviously writing scripts to incorporate it, you know what I mean, like, and to prove like, look, we no longer do this, isn't it great, or but it's like there's things that still exist that are ugly in both of those factors, you know what I mean, like my brother is the producer, and he told me about this thing that was like, if you have a script and it doesn't say what race the person is in the script, like they have a thing called default white that I didn't even know about.
What does that mean, like, default white?
Like the character that is in it, if it doesn't specify what race it is, then a lot of people in the industry default it to white. So that character will be like, if let's say, okay,
interesting,
that character gets shot in the script and they're in pre-production, the person isn't casted yet, and they need a fake torso for that person to get killed. And so then the effects shop is like, well, am I making the person, well, the person isn't casted yet, and you need this fake torso to fly to this different country at a certain point in time, so we have to make it. And then they default make it to white and fly it out. And then if that person gets casted, then it's now up on the people on set's job to make the color of the skin to the person that's actually casted. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know about that, which is still to me a problem.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
I had no idea. That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, like I said, I think it's a thing that is a known problem, and I think it's a thing that people are changing and trying to change.
Right.
And especially with the newer generations, you know, there's a lot of the older generations are retiring, and the newer generations are taking over, and I think all of that is different, and it's a good thing.
Do you think though, because now you mentioned your brother's a producer, I'm wondering if you, because of the insight you have about how the industry is being handled with the older heads now that have that old mindset of, you know, women are like this, or, you know, men should be doing this, you know, that's obviously going away. But there's a part of me that always wonders too, that those that are following suit, that are following, you know, in those in that position, I'm wondering if that mindset is still left behind with those people that are taking over. You understand what I'm coming at with that, where they still carry that same mindset, even though they are part of this new generation that's running things now, that they still carry the same set of values, if you will, that, you know, all right, well, you know, let's just get a person of color now to do this part, so that way people can just, you know, not complain about, hey, there's the lack of POCs in the film, what's going on. So they're just trying to cater to that rather than really taking into consideration, guys, you know, let's just try to add some more flavor to it. But let's actually look at someone else who's really good for the part. And if there happens to be a person of color, let's hire them because they're good for the part, because that's what we want to see, rather than let's just do it to cater to the mass audience, so that way they can just leave us alone and not complain about it.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's seemingly both. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's like, I mean, yeah, I think unconsciously, just like even outside of like the film industry, I think consciously and sometimes unconsciously, maybe even more so than consciously, people, you know, especially they're sort of, their brains are wired in this way because they were brought up in that way or whatever, you know what I mean? So they have to rethink things that they maybe didn't think were wrong, you know? Like, of course, that probably, or I know it does exist, you know? But and I think, and like I said, I think it's a mixture of both. I think that it's a mixture of people, especially people of power that own all these companies that are like, you know, incorporating these things so that people shut up or whatever.
Right.
But at the same time, they know that it's a problem, so they want to incorporate it, which is inevitably a good thing, even if it is stemming from a wrong reason or from a reason that like makes them a shitty person. It's still like inevitably doing good because it's giving people more opportunities.
Right.
But I think that it is also happening naturally. And I think a lot of people are actually creating stories about it, which I think are really cool. Like, I don't know if you watch any of the like, of like Us or Them or any of those movies or TV shows that came out, or the Underground Railroad. But there's a lot of like scripts being written and that are really great, that are, you know, or even Lovecraft Country, where it's like, it's these cool stories of how of such ugly racism that exists and has existed, and they're also incorporating like horror, or, you know, like that alone, like if you think about the movie industry and TV and how powerful it is to like tell stories with like messages behind it, you know, like that it's so influential to people, and it's people, and it like wakes people up. And I think using that as a tool to send to inform people or give knowledge to people or make them have empathy, or I think is important, you know, like I think art in general can do that. And I think particularly films and TV, and like, you know, most people watch TV now and Netflix and stuff. So it could definitely, there's an ugly side to it, but you know, it can definitely be used in ways for good. And I think that it's all, the ugly things and the great things are all happening all at once. And of course it is, you know what I mean? I think that's just a way life is in general, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like you're not going to have any, just a good thing, you know, like even the internet, it's a great thing. It's also a real shit thing, you know, like, so yeah. But for women, you know, I think it's gotten a lot better, and I think it could get even better than it is now. And you know, I myself have dealt with my own things of like, you know, like I'm a producer type of things, you know what I mean? Like men that are like, if you want to get successful and you sleep with me, I'll give you that. You know what I mean? Like I, of course, have dealt with that.
Yeah.
So have most women that I know, you know what I mean? So, but that happens to me particularly way less now than it did even when I was first starting, you know what I mean?
Right.
So,
but did that change maybe your motivations to want to continue in the industry, you know, with your field, because of those you know, because of those incidents where you were dealt with guys who wanted to take advantage of it because you were a woman, that they probably took a liking to you, and then has that made you want to step away from it altogether and then reevaluate where you want to go with yourself as far as what career path you want to take, or maybe that may had put a halt with you want to pursue your other passions because of one or two bad incidents that you have dealt with because of some guy who just left a bad taste in your mouth from wanting to pursue that as a result of that interaction with them?
I would say that sometimes the negative experiences that I have with people in general has made me question if I want to get out of the industry. Yeah, sure. But like certain circumstances, like the one that I described, like in those instances, it didn't feel like I wanted to get out of the industry. It felt like I wanted justice for that specific person or that specific experience. You know what I mean? To which, like, because it happens so much, and if the person who's doing it to you, it's likely that they've done it to other women. And then when all those women came out, like I've actually experienced this, like with a particular person in the industry, it all happened to a bunch of different women that I know from the same person. And we were all able to like tell, you know, one of them got a lawyer. The lawyer talked to all of us individually, and all of us were like, you know, like the Me Too movement, you know what I mean? We're all like, whoa, that guy did that to you too? Me too. What the fuck? And like, and all the stories were kind of the same, you know what I mean? Right. Like he told us to meet him at a party. We went to the party. He fucking blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? We were like, whoa. So we were able to like, you know, take action amongst that one individual. But if something like that was happening to me like every day, then yeah, I'd probably be like, fuck this, you know? But it doesn't. And it's more of the thing that happens more consistently to me is just seeing the way that like untreated, sort of like maybe emotionally unstable human beings are treating each other to like for the prestige. Like to
what do you mean by that? Like on the emotionally unstable. What do you mean by that?
Well, like I feel like everyone sort of maybe needs some, like even myself, like some therapy. You know what I mean? Okay. Like we all kind of have things that are like, you know, maybe we're, I don't know, what is the pinnacle of health, and is there anyone just totally spiritually fit, healthy person? You know, like we all sort of seem like we have baggage to deal with. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So that's just what I mean. But
okay.
But like, there's something particular when you, I think, are working in an industry that has so much prestige that people are very competitive and they want to take you down, and then sometimes they'll do ugly things in order to do that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They want the money, they want the name, they want the rock stardom, you know, like, so, and it's more of like those collectively things that are maybe don't seem as intense like in the moment as like, whoa, this guy's like sexually assaulting me or something,
Right.
but they're happening more consistently. It's or you're just being talked down to because like that person that is above you, quote unquote above you in the industry, has such a big ego that they look at you like you're nothing, you know what I mean? Like
Dismissive. Yeah.
Right, like that stuff I think happens more consistently. That makes me be like, oh, do I want to work in this industry?
I see. Okay.
You know?
Yeah, it's a rough thing because that's one thing I picked up on with who I've talked to in the industry. In most cases, it's a variety of like things that they have to overcome, and obviously some things they won't be sharing for a number of different reasons. But the most consistent thing is that that I've come across that this business, the entertainment business, is not for the weak of heart. That's what I've always picked up on. It's going to make you a stronger person, or it's going to break you, or it's going to break you down, make you to something that you want or that you're perceived to be, and then you're going through this conveyor belt of like having to put on a show in other areas that you probably didn't expect to put on a show for example, like doing interviews or whatever the case may be. I guess before, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you as well, apart from the music, but also to understand, your perspective on in the industry that you're in right now and how that's like for you, because it's I think it's really important to highlight the people that are behind the scenes that most people tend to overlook, that really do have a strong contributive thing that they are putting in there in the film or the TV show that they're working on. Because I think about the times when you're telling me about when you guys are losing sleep and you're at that breaking point where you just want to go home and say, fuck this shit, because I don't want to be here anymore. And then that will affect on how the actual product will come out to look like, because 10 episodes before that you were working on, you were the things look really good. And all of a sudden in episode 10 or 9, it's not looking as good because you guys were losing sleep up to that point, and therefore it affected the final product. So there's a lot of different things that I look out for to keep an eye on, as far as where the person was at that point in their life and where they are now, previously, where they are now with it. So I think most people don't care. I honestly don't care that they don't care. I care because I think it's important to highlight those things. And I'm hoping that people will catch on to that eventually, because hearing about that strike, there's a reason for that. But I think 90% of the audience or the public's not going to understand that or really care to look into that, because all they want to see is the final product. And that's what the big wigs, if you are focusing on. That's all they want to cater to, because that's what they want to. They rely on the people's ignorance and not being aware of that sort of stuff. The movie sucked. Well, that's because, the actor sucked. Well, why was the actor shitty at that role? Because he was fucking tired. That's why. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, and I'm sure, because I know you have to be heading out soon because you got to go to practice. But I just want to say one thing here about you, that I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with me about this, because, as I said before, I wanted to highlight on some areas of the industry that most people tend to overlook. And they may appreciate to some degree, but I don't think they really understand in some cases how difficult that field can be for a number of different reasons. Just for the work that's involved, the amount of hours that's involved, the things that affect your work in other areas as far as your personal life is concerned, and other different things that you're doing too that you have to divide the time to devote all your attention to work on the said project. So, for you to be able to explain that and to talk with me about that and share your insight about that really was very helpful for me to learn, because there's some things that I just was not privy to at all that you have shared here that I have come to understand and actually appreciate a lot more with the people in the industry, especially in your particular field, which is something that I think I hope people would respect and not take for granted when they see, a TV show and say, well, that sucked. Well, I don't think it sucked because they sucked. I think it may have seemed that way because they were exhausted, and you've got to give them the time of the day to understand where they're coming from. So, I mean, I'm rambling on here, but I hope you understand that's why I thought this conversation was very important to have here, because it's something that I want people to be very knowledgeable in and be educated in, and to respect the craft, because it's something that we should not take for granted, because there are people's lives at stake at times where we're dismissing them, but I don't think we should, even if the work they may not agree with or not like, but they still respect the process. That's what I'm hoping to accomplish here with everybody that would have to take the time to listen to this and watch this as well too. But is there anything that you want to get that you want to promote here, as far as like anything that you're working on? Because I know Human Issues was one thing that we were talking about here that you touched upon here, but is there anything else you want to highlight before we sign off here that you want people to be on the lookout for anything that you have coming down the pipeline?
Mostly just like the release show for my solo album, the CrowJane solo album, January 21st, Zebulon.
Well, listen, I'm going to leave you to it, but I want to say thank you so much again for taking the time here, and I'm going to hopefully be able to splice everything together with what we had previously to where we are with it now, to make it pretty cohesive here. So, but I want to say thank you for doing this here for me, to allow me to have this conversation and finish it off here with that. So but until then, you take care of yourself, and thanks again for taking the time here.
Thank you for having me.